JCPOA and we can see what happened during the time of sanctions, I'm welcome to be able to look at those facts. During the time of the JCPOA, as I mentioned before, from 2015 to 2017, munitions fired against American troops in Iraq increased 341%. Many of those munitions were Iranian provided. So to be able to say that there were no attacks on Americans during the JCPOA is just factually not correct. I can take you to a multitude of members of the United States military that will speak specifically of munitions that were fired on them. And all kinds of improvised explosive devices created by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and shipped into Iraq to be able to attack us specifically during that time period. So it's just not factually correct. There were no attacks on Americans while the JCPOA was there. In fact, all the folks that look at these issues saw that terrorism increased 183% during that time period. During the time of the sanctions, Iran suffered real consequences in their economy, including a dramatic drop in their own defense spending by 28% during that time period. I received a personal outreach from an individual who's a leader in Lebanon, which my colleague and I both know well, that reached out to me personally and said, whatever the United States is doing right now to cut off funding to Iran, keep doing it, because it's also cutting off funding to Hezbollah in Lebanon. They're not getting their paychecks right now, and that's helping the stability of our government. So there was a real effect during that time period. We can discuss strategic aspects of which one's more effective, the agreement or the heavier sanctions, but we can't just ignore and say there was no benefit during that time period of the last several years on the pressure that was put on Iran during this time period. The fact still remains, the people of Iran are asking the question. They are on the streets chanting for freedom. What is the Senate going to do to stand with them? And currently it's nothing. I'd like for it to be something to stand with the people of Iran as they speak out against a repressive regime that they're under the thumb of. With that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that with respect to the resolution of ratification, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, and the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
Without objection.
And I also ask unanimous consent that the Secretary of the Senate be authorized to make grammatical, technical changes to the resolution of ratification with respect to Treaty Document 117-1 in order to reflect the addition of material.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm here today as we close in on the vote on the Disclose Act as scheduled for tomorrow to urge my colleagues to vote yes on that measure. I have introduced the Disclose Act in every Congress since Leader Schumer first unveiled it in 2010 on the heels of the wretched Citizens United decision. Every Congress, just about every time I've set foot in Washington, I have sounded the alarm on the ever-growing tsunami of slime that Citizens United unleashed into our elections. I rise once more today to urge this chamber to end the flood of dark money drowning our democracy. This is not inevitable. As late as 2006, the amount of dark money sloshing around in our elections was only $5 million. In 2020, it had crossed the $1 billion threshold. Big special interests don't spend $1 billion without expecting return on investment.
I want to weigh in on two things that recently has been said here. First of all, about the Iran uprising that is going on currently right now, that their people have finally awakened to the regime that they are under, that are protesting in the sense of women cutting off their hair and pulling off their face veils, and it's just a remarkable time right now of seeing the historical the historical pretense of what the people are counter-reacting against that regime over there. And I personally feel like that we, as a republic, open democracy republic, should actually stand with the people that are doing this right now in some form or fashion, because they have finally awakened. And I think one of the things that has awakened them is the fact of artificial intelligence as far as smartphone technology. The graphic that you're looking at right there pertaining to how the black money or the dark money, getting on this other subject that they're talking about right now, and I realize a lot of people may say, well, Dennis, if you're supposed to be a man of God, if you're supposed to be preaching and giving out advisories and warnings coming out of the Bible, how come you reflect so much on political affairs? The answer to that is easy. And the answer to that is the fact that we, even to this day, still are not seeing positive effects coming from our own United States government in the reflection of fixing or healing that in which what has been broken. Proof is in the pudding of that chart that you're looking at right there, and how in the world that it can go from 5 billion to 5 million to a 1 billion is that's a big gap. It takes a lot of freaking what does it take, a million to make a billion? I mean, that's a big gap right there between 5 billion and 1 billion. 5 million versus 1 billion. That is a big gap. But that tells you right there the very things that Donald J. Trump was talking about during the time that he was talking about America being for sale. America being for sale. This is what he was talking about. You got these lobbyists now that has these deep pockets that has come into America. Somebody told me that China almost owns as much property in America than what the Americans own. That's almost, to me, that's unacceptable that we have allowed for this to occur in our own country. Because I guarantee you, you can't go to their country and purchase up a bunch of property over there unless you're a citizen to that particular country. And you got to go through all kinds of customs, and you got to be approved of this, approved of that. Kind of like going to Chile. Chile's a really nice place. It's upbeat. Crime is fairly low there. But I guarantee you, to go to Chile and to become a true member or a citizen of Chile, you got to go through cartwheels and somersaults, and even then you still may not become a citizen of Chile. We have failed in the concept of just allowing for any and everything to come over here to America and set up camp just because they have exchanged their rubles to American dollars, or their yen to American dollars, or their Spanish money to American dollars, and basically come over here and done just exactly what Donald Trump was talking about towards buying America out. And to think that this is being done on the level that it's being done, 1 billion. What's going to be the next chart? 1 trillion? I mean, there has to be some sort of intervention in where and how we can go as an American government if we are going to be not only self-sustainable, but if we are going to be able to maintain and formulate the original Constitution that our ancestors helped to formulate. If not, we are taking a chance on allowing for all these people to gain such of a toehold here in America to the degree that they could actually take over from the inside out. And I'm just going to use the Mexicans as an example, and I'm not trying to pick on the Mexicans, but if you get enough Mexicans over here and all of a sudden they decide to vote and formulate their own people towards kicking all the American people out and all the American way of people out, basically you can turn America into a second Mexico. And people may say, oh, that won't never happen, that can't happen. Oh, really? Then how come Brezhnev over in Russia said that we'll take the American people over and never fire a shot? Don't you think that the Russians, even before Reagan, had already detected a weakness or a breach in our government stability? And that's exactly what's happening right now. We are being attacked from the inside out to the degree that it has turned into a disease or a contamination that eventually, if we don't stop this or put an end to this one way or the other, either by changing policies and laws or maybe by changing the whole American currency over to something else that can be tracked much better other than hardcore cash, if we don't do something very quickly, we stand a strong possibility of being voted out and another regime being voted in. And don't say that it can't happen, because whenever you allow with this many people coming over here with this type of influences and your laws is this lax, you are substantive to having things basically change right in front of your very eyes, the sleight of the hands, kind of like the magician trick, to the degree that America will no longer be America. Not in the sense of the way that we believe that America should be America. And if the truth be known, America, even to this day in the year 2022, is not America, based upon some of the standards that America played by and had going back just as little as 75 to 125 years ago. If you go back to 75 to 125 years ago, which would put you somewhere in the range of either World War I or before World War I, America no longer functions in its courts and in its policy making the same today as what they did then. And of course, your lobbyists and your psychiatric doctors will say, well, we've grown up and we've become more modernized, and we feel like that we're more sophisticated, and we believe in doing things in more of a civilized way today versus what they done in America 75 to 125 years ago. Really? Is that right? Well, how come is it that just within the past few days, Cook County, Illinois just got through passing some sort of a city ordinance to the point that if you do something to the point of committing a crime, even if it's a federal crime, odds are you're not going to go to jail because their jails is full, their courts is full. The last time I looked in New York City alone, if you get booked on some sort of a major charge that it's scheduled to go in front of a hearing about, they're booked something like 5 years from now. Well, in 5 years from now, a lot of things can change. In 5 years from now, the people that originally had the charge may die. In 5 years from now, the people that was being violated may not never see no true justice pertaining to the courts being so full. Well, that's what they're running into right now up in basically Cook County, Chicago. And the way I understand it, that your property owners now has went over into a type similar vigilante type martial law, to the degree that now they can kill who they feel like that they need to kill, because they broke in and maybe seen something attractive or appealing towards breaking in somebody's property or somebody's home. And of course, in some incidences, you can have some people that would intentionally want to entice or entrap people. Let's say they open up their garage door and they see a motorcycle in there, or they see a Corvette, or they see a bunch of tools in a toolbox and an air compressor, and they see all kinds of goodies that they know that they could easily take just within a matter of a few minutes. And all of a sudden you entrap, you put this entrapment in front of people, and all of a sudden you got 2 or 3 guys coming in there, and the guy that owns the property shoots and kills all of them. How do you know the difference between whether or not it was something that was maliciously being created by the criminal, or if it was something maliciously being created by now the victim that has that type of authority in Chicago? So there's no doubt that the dirty dark money that they're calling here dark money, and it's not just drug dealers, it's not just prostitutions, it's not just people working for pennies on a dime in these farms or ranches pertaining to the Mexican labor force. It's across the board. You got doctors, you got lawyers, you got bankers, you got preachers, you got all kinds of different sectors of people that are basically working on the sidelines. And if they wasn't obtaining the cash flow that they was obtaining, they probably would, they themselves would become late on some payments of either some yachts or some condominiums, or wouldn't be able to provide the right type of money status in putting their nieces or their cousins or their nephews in college. You got all kinds of people out there. Whenever I was going through the circuit, as many times as I've been ushered through the circuit towards being psychologically, emotionally studied, I couldn't tell you that the amount of people that I run into was either doctors, lawyers, high-ranking business people that was associated with some of the high-rises down in Miami, Florida, that was involved in illegal trading pertaining to stocks and bonds, professors, teachers, any and all the above. It wasn't just hardcore hobos and bums and mean-spirited people that's in your prison systems today. You have any and everybody imaginable that has got caught doing whatever that they was doing, and now they're having to pay the consequences in doing it. What you're seeing here pertaining to the dark money is only a window of opportunity that causes more malice behavior of occurring. And it's similar towards the property owner opening up his garage door, allowing for his motorcycle or his toolboxes or his Corvette or whatever's in there to be an enticing fact, luring people in illegitimately towards thinking that that's going to give him the right basically to become an all-out and out vigilante murderer. That's what cash has done to our great nation. It has opened up a window of opportunity towards people being able to take advantage of the system, and they are basically now it is almost turned into a lifeline for a lot of them, because if they was not still operating illegitimately with this dark money, they probably could no longer survive the way that they've been surviving. Well, that's the whole issue. The way that they have been surviving has been illegitimately to begin with, because power exceeds corruptfulness. Corruptfulness exceeds power, and what you're looking at right there is basically a window of opportunity of giving more people the opportunity of making money with the dark money. Now listen to what this individual has to say in regards to this, because I felt like that this needed to be looked at in more of a deeper form, just like looking at the deal with Iran, with the people standing up against their regime. Are we basically going to turn our backs on Russia? Let's say that there was a major influx of people that stood up against the Russian regime, to the point that the people voice was starting to be heard, and that the people was actually winning over against that evil regime, to the degree of seeing where the people was exceeding over their government. Are we going to sit idly by with Russia pertaining to their citizens trying to overtake or correct their government, the same way that we're going to sit back idly by and watch Iran, their people, basically try to overtake or correct their government? A lot of these governments that are operating the way that they're operating, first of all, they've been operating that way for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and that's the way that they have become accustomed to operating. And to go in there and change their whole concept, there's actually a great deal of them that is incompetent, to the degree that they don't know how to do anything any differently without some sort of great leadership coming from the American government. It's the same thing of what happened 30 plus years ago, whenever the Russian government collapsed and the Berlin Wall fell during the latter part of Ronald Reagan's administration. There was a lot of people during that time in Russia that now had suddenly been given a bit of freedom, that didn't know what to do with themselves, because they had been so accustomed of being ordered around like a bunch of robots or like a bunch of slaves, that they basically couldn't think for themselves. And that's one reason why that I admire the Ukrainian people, is because the Ukrainian people has broken out of that bewitching that obviously a great deal of countries still control their citizens under, regardless whether it's China, Honduras, Mexico with your drug lords, or Colombia, or some of these other misfitting countries, Cuba, etc., etc. I really admire the fact that the Ukrainian people are willing to stand on their ground and say, you know what, we'd rather die than to go back under the same regime that we was under before basically Putin ever become president, pertaining to going back to the old methods and the old ways in Russia. That they would rather die than they would to go back to that. And if a person does not admire that, if they don't admire that in which what free-willed people are willing to do for themselves, then obviously they probably don't like our system over here, that's exactly what our ancestors had to do to prove their point, was to stand up against the regime of King George III and say enough is enough during the Revolutionary War, and basically retaliated against that type of tyranny. Did it cost thousands and thousands of lives? You're darn right it did. Did George Washington have to do things that he didn't want to do? You're darn right he did. Did George Washington gather up farmers and regular people off the streets, which at that time they didn't have streets, they just had roads, walkways or whatever? But did George Washington have spies, and did he have people that was working with the same vision and in the same dream? You're darn right he did. You're darn right he did. That's the reason why our Constitution says for all, not part of all, justice for all. That's the whole concept of the dream. All, A-L-L. That means no matter what your last name is, no matter how you obtained your palace with drug, dirty money or whatever, you're no better and you're no worse than the citizen beside you or around you. All. And it should be operated that way, not only in America, but throughout the land. And that's the reason why we're seeing these sudden upbursts pertaining to these countries now that are basically imploding right in front of our very eyes towards people recognizing that the Western world, pertaining to their democracy that they inherited from the United Kingdom or the European world over there. I think it was Greece or somewhere where they originally started all this stuff. That particular system is the better system above and beyond communism or socialism or any other type of ism. That system is the best system to have, and that's the reason why we stand where we stand as not only a Christian society, but as a free will society, in knowing that what is fair for the goose is fair for the gander. In other words, if our system was not set up the way that it was set up, all them people that I just got through mentioning to you that I've seen in jails, regardless whether it was professors or deans in colleges or doctors or lawyers or even judges or whoever, all them people that I just got through mentioning to you pertaining to the High Almighty, I never would have seen any of them. You know why? Because the system would have protected them. Because the system in and of itself would have been corrupt, and corruption breeds more corruption. That usually breeds off of power pertaining to people that are using their powers in the wrong way. And what you're looking at right there in the billions, with all your lobbyists and all the people coming over here with their big bucks and translating it over to American dollars, what you're seeing is the beginning phases of the failure of our original system. The system is already under a great deal of stress pertaining to us being trillions of dollars in debt, and this is one of the reasons why, is because we have allowed for this to go on for a certain amount of time without putting an end to it. And now today, it's the same way that the Syndicate rules and runs its affairs. Now today, you got as many or as much people, if not more, that operate below the table than you do above the table. So that in and of itself is telling me the direction that our original system is in or heading towards is in fact a broken system. That's the reason why my brother and I put the cross out here and tilted it over to the side, representing the system, because it was the system that crucified Jesus Christ. The cross itself didn't crucify Jesus Christ. It was the people that supported that system at that time, and the way that they projected penalty to their criminal activity, especially those that deserve to die that way, pertaining to capital punishment. That's the way that they maintain their system. Because if they didn't have that system pertaining to the all out and out criminal that Jesus Christ was not, If they did not have that system, you would have total chaos. You would have basically the same type of world that you had before the flood, or you would basically have the same type of system that basically Sodom and Gomorrah was set up on. And whenever you have that type of system that is no longer considered a decent or a fair system, if it goes on long enough and strong enough, that's whenever God himself will come back and put an end to it. And he will throw not just this nation, but this world off into great tribulation. We have to be wise enough to discover our failures. That way we can strengthen our successes. And if we're not willing to do that, even after seeing the facts right in front of our very eyes, we have no one to blame but ourselves and those that are playing off on the system. Please listen to what this individual has to say, please.
That has damaged our democracy. Voting to clean up that mess presents clear choices. Whether or not billionaires and big corporations can purchase influence in secret. Whether or not Americans deserve to know who's buying that influence. Whether or not corruption has a place in our American democracy. 12 years after Citizens United, the evidence is in. Dark money powers up corporations and mega donors to pump billions into phony front groups. Those groups, often with soothing names like People for Puppies and Prosperity, then spew bile and slime into our elections. We often can't know exactly who paid for that bile and slime, but when corporations and the ultra-rich keep getting what they want from a dark money funded Congress, well, you see that over and over and over again, and American suspicions grow.
That's the reason why in 2014, my brother and I talked it over, and he helped me spend a half a day out here towards erecting this broken cross representing the broken system. And whenever we had done that in this particular neighborhood that I'm in right here, there was a outcrying or a uprising locally amongst several of the locals, give or take about a dozen families, that just thought that what that David and I was doing out here, in their eyes, they thought it was an abomination. Why did they think that? First of all, they was under the influence of believing that the cross was something sacred, in which, in some degree, after about 1,000 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the cross subsequently has become, in some people's eyes, something sacred. Okay? But it's only because they have been misled, and it's because that they was not educated properly in understanding just exactly what the cross actually was during the time that the Romans was using the cross for capital punishment. It wasn't the cross that was sacred pertaining to how and what it done to the Lord Jesus Christ. It was what happened on the cross pertaining to the Lord Jesus Christ that is the sacred part. It's not the cross that's sacred. It's Jesus Christ that was crucified on the cross. And it says in the Bible very clearly that we're not supposed to, bow down to images and stuff like that, because we're taking things out of context in regard towards just exactly where things should properly be in the form of reality. And like I said, a lot of these people around here thought, oh my God, what they're doing is just a very, very sinful act. It's got to be just uh, uh, some sort of an abomination in the eyes of God because of the way that they have positioned the cross. It didn't have to do with nothing of being about slanderous. It didn't have nothing to do with being disrespectful to God or what happened to God's Holy Son on the cross. What it had to do with was the very subject matter in which this individual right here is bringing out into the eyes of the general public right here, pertaining to the dark money and people that is working under the table, surviving solely off of this type of system. This type of system is basically the same system that the Syndicate operates off of. Your underground, illegal, organized crime. And whenever you have more of a system like this than you do a legitimate system, then you have a broken system. Now the next question is, how are we going to repair it? How can we repair it? I think personally the only way of repairing it is either one, you declare the dollar bill basically out of fit with reality, and all of a sudden you're going to change the whole concept of the dollar bill. You may change the look, may change the color, may change the size. You give everybody a certain amount of time to turn in what money that they do have stuck up underneath their mattresses, and then within a period of time, those dollar bills, it don't matter if you dig somebody's backyard and you find a suitcase full of $100 bills, those $100 bills won't be worth a dime. You know why? Because now you've created a different system. And now those greenbacks is no longer honored towards being a legitimate system. Or you could go over to a digital system, regardless whether it was Bitcoin or whatever. And if we don't watch, Russia and China is going to come together towards modifying some sort of a monetary digital system, and they're going to leave America plumb out. And whenever that happens, then we're not going to have no say-so at all as far as a world order say-so. We're going to be left completely out of the picture. You know why? Because we couldn't come together. We couldn't unify. We couldn't compromise on the do's and the don'ts and the ifs and the ands, and we sat back and we thought that we was doing the right thing by allowing for all these crooks and all these big money people and all these illegal people to be doing what they was doing. In the meantime, you got Russia and China and God only knows who else that are whispering things in the background, and the next thing you know, they create a more powerful system than what the American system is. The American dollar is still good. It's not as strong as what it used to be in a lot of places, but it's still good. It's still operating. People still want the American dollar bill. You know why? Because it's honored as a doable system. Well, whenever you have a system that bucks that system, pertaining to Russia and China coming together in developing their own system, the next thing you know, people won't even look at the green dollar back bill. They'll say, well, that thing ain't no good. Well, if we're not involved in that currency exchange towards that world order, then we're going to be sucking, you know what, hind, as the little farmer used to say, hind tit, and we're not going to be getting none of the milk, and what little bit of milk that we do get won't be enough to survive off of. You need to pay attention to what this individual has said and what he is saying.
Their gut tells them the corporations and billionaires are behind the phony ads out to rig our political system. And Americans' instincts are right. Academic studies show that economic elite and business interests command huge influence in government policy, while regular people have statistically little or none.
And if you don't believe that statement that he just made, look at your corporate insurance agencies. Before the early 1900s, they was just becoming established here in America right after the Civil War, along with other big commodities that basically got a foothold, and some of your other bigger banks that got a bigger foothold. And they started out small, and they started working, kind of like your encyclopedia man that went around from house to house selling encyclopedias, and the next thing you know, the whole neighborhood had encyclopedias. You know, they changed the concept of what was going on in little bites at a time, to the point that now our insurance industry has taken control almost over every facet of our lives. You can't buy an automobile and buy it on credit without having insurance. You can't operate an automobile legally in most states in America without you operating it without having some form of insurance. So that entity has taken over our lives, beginning in the late 1800s and starting out small, and now turning out to be conglomerates, giants, that basically are a great deal of these lobbyists that decide that they're going to change a law or make a law. They're the ones that's up there in the city hall, in the Capitol building, that's up there lobbying for various people to vote in things and vote out things. It's the power players that have now come in to our country and changed the dynamics of the way that we thought, with the way that we thought about one another, the way that we relied upon certain things with one another, and that's just one example. You can go over to your insurance companies and basically decipher the same thing. You know, the doctors, you know, that started coming into play before the Civil War, the ones that went around, your medicine man, went around selling tainted water that had a little bit of sugar in it, and made people feel good because they told them that it was medicine. And then they started becoming legitimized. I know whenever my great-great-grandfather was operating a store less than a quarter of a mile from here called the Limb Store, they had products on their shelves that they were selling at that time that government agencies did not have absolutely no power or control over. None. Some of those agencies, whenever they become control over those particular drugs, made life better for a lot of people, because a lot of people was doing stuff to themselves that they shouldn't have been doing. Same way with controlling of Turner milk. Whenever Turner milk come into play towards controlling the temperature of the milk, controlling the decency of the way the milk barn looked, controlling this, controlling that, as far as keeping things, keeping the level of contamination down, it basically ended a great deal of people that was in the milking industry at that time, because they either couldn't afford it or they wasn't going to have somebody telling them how to operate their business, even though they was telling them the things that they was telling them for the betterment of the good of the will of the people. Because if you don't keep your milk a certain temperature, if you do allow for your cows to get over into a bunch of honeysuckles or a bunch of wild onions, you're going to taint the milk. And the milk had to be qualified for the Turner Association to stamp it as it being approved and decent to go out to the general public. You got some of these pockets around here that if you would have left them alone, they'd still be milking cows the way that they was milking cows back in the 18th century. And I guess to some extent, you'll probably find some of your Mennonites and Amish people that still operates on that same level, but they do it on a very, very low key level, and there's only a few families that actually participate in operating that way. If they was to want to do things in a big way towards selling, you know, having the milk industry to come out and gather up the milk once a week or twice a week, or if they was selling a bunch of milk to the general public, I'm pretty sure that somebody would raise a red flag to it. Why? Because of the safety and the benefit for the people. It's the same way with this runaway train here that now has gotten out of the boundaries or the rails to the degree that now our system is operating completely differently than what it was originally set up to operate towards.
These also show that politicians elected to federal office with the support of dark money are more likely to support legislation aligned with big corporate interests. Regardless of what the American people want, the big donor interests win time after time.
There you go.
And dark money isn't limited to elections either. I've come to the floor now 18 times to expose a decades-long right-wing scheme to capture the federal judiciary and its crown jewel, our Supreme Court. This scheme included a $580 million secretive campaign of dark money and phony front groups to pack the courts with judges selected to greenlight donor-friendly policies, running multi-million-dollar ad campaigns to keep the confirmations of those judges and justices on track. Now, the result is the court that dark money built is delivering big for its donor puppeteers. In a matter of days, the FedSoc 6 on the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, manufactured new polluter-friendly legal doctrines, and threw out centuries-old gun safety regulations. All things big donors wanted, all things majorities of Americans did not want. What's more, one right-wing donor just dumped $1.6 billion to supercharge the dark money operation that captured the court and cement that dark money network's hold over the federal judiciary. And guess what? We wouldn't know who that donor is if someone hadn't tipped off the press, ProPublica and the New York Times. Think about that. We only know this because we get occasional little glimpses of these mega donors' covert schemes. That means this is only the tip of the iceberg. And where that $1.6 billion goes on its way out into our political system will be obscured in dark money channels. No wonder Americans' trust in the government is cratering. 58% of voters say our government needs major reforms or complete overhaul.
There you go.
Just a quarter of Americans say they have confidence in the Supreme Court. That's down 11% just from last year. Americans know something is deeply amiss in our democracy. Mr. President, I believe to restore trust in government, we need to flush dark money out of government. Year after year, poll after poll, overwhelming majorities of Americans say money in politics and wealthy political donors are the root of Washington's dysfunction.
And the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. And we have basically done what Donald Trump had brought up to the American people, that America was for sale. Our policies, our Constitution has never been up for sale. That's the reason why it says all, A-L-L. Whenever we start steering away from those policies, those original policies, then we are no longer functioning under the same regime. That's what I tell you about, that it has already began, and it has began with certain very, very wealthy, rich lobbyists or different people from other countries coming over here getting a good footing into the American system and to the American way, to the degree now that now we have to compromise on our rights and our wrongs, even at the expense of almost 3,000 people pertaining to 9/11, that our government basically refuses to do the right thing in retaliating against Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia has got almost $1 trillion of investments over here in America. We was never supposed to have allowed for anything like this to have went on. And it didn't matter if it was from Saudi Arabia or if it was Canada or Mexico or Russia or China. We was never supposed to allow for people to come over here and be able to push their way around and do whatever that they wanted to do in any way that they wanted to do it. And because they had special interest groups here, that we just basically had to take it on the cheek and go on. We have been basically sold downstream. And the selling down the stream did not begin overnight. It began over the period of years that I and myself and many more people have pinpointed it down to the assassination of JFK. That ever since the early 60s, our politicians have been walking backwards. They have been compromising. And then in the late 80s, whenever Ronald Reagan finally convinced the superpowers that the world was not going to be destroyed by humanity, that's whenever they sure enough went backwards. All of them at the same time. And that has put us where we are today, after 30 some odd years have went by, towards allowing for these big money interest groups to come over here and basically take control of our streets, take control of our laws, take control of our insurance companies, take control of our courts, take control of our hospitals, take control of our healthcare institutions, take control basically over right near everything. They've even taken control over a great deal of the way that people believe and worship here in America, pertaining to the mega churches, the corporate religions. They have come in and taken over. Is this what our establishment was established to let it occur this way? Kind of reminds me of the movie The Pale Rider, whenever the individual found the big nugget of gold, and the individual that was trying to push them all out offered to buy them all out, and they all sat down and had a conversation about taking the money that the hood was offering them. And then one of them wisened up and said, okay, let's say we go ahead and accept the money. Let's say we pack up, we move down the road, we find us another area that we like, we start panhandling for gold, and we start finding some, and we fall in love with that area too. What's going to be the price next time for selling out our dignity, for selling out our pride, for selling out the things that we know that we shouldn't sell out, that shouldn't be for sale to begin with? That's what's happened to America pertaining to the dark money. That's where we stand towards a broken system. And if we as Americans can't see that and understand that, and push towards becoming self-independent again, as we and our ancestors intended for us to be, we're only going to continue to go down this deep, dark hole of being now $30 trillion in debt because the system is being abused and used and taken advantage of. We're only going to continue to see the conglomerate and the rich get richer, and the working class and the poor get poor. The exact same thing has happened over there in Europe to the degree that now they don't even have the mid-class. It's basically either you're a power player towards being the dominant ones that are in control of everything, or you're the poorest of the poor. Their very dream, their very desires, their very ideals have basically been destroyed too as well, pertaining to the working class working and dedicating themselves loyally to a company, and then at the end of their lifespan living out the rest of their years in a rocking chair, during the rocking chair era, to where they got everything paid off and they can basically sit back and enjoy life. That system has been broken over there to the point that now the very same system over here is being torn apart too. Why is it being torn apart? Because we have allowed it. Certain politicians has allowed it to occur.
Election cycle after election cycle, even during COVID, voters listed political corruption among their most important issues. Americans no longer trust that their voices matter here, not as much as the dark money voices of big corporations and billionaires. And it's time to listen to them. It's time to rid our system of the corrupting influence of unlimited dark money. Even the Citizens United justices recognized that unlimited political spending without transparency would corrupt. Even the justices who opened the floodgates of unlimited political spending knew that if it was not transparent, it would corrupt.
Contaminate.
They just wouldn't do anything about it.
Contaminate.
The Disclose Act hinges on a very simple idea, that Americans deserve to know who's spending to influence their vote. If you agree with that simple idea, vote for the Disclose Act. If you believe that corporations and billionaires shouldn't hide behind phony front groups while spending gobs of money in elections, you should vote for the Disclose Act. If you oppose corruption, you should vote for the Disclose Act. It is time for every member of this body to go on record about this poison in our system.
Exactly.
With any luck, with 10 Republicans joining us, we can return to a Congress that serves America again. And Americans deserve that.
We can't even have people now that agree upon what road to fix because we have so many roads that's going bad. We can't even agree towards the same Savior, even though there's only one Savior, because of all these different affiliations and denominations that's popped up everywhere towards people having different ideals about the Bible. I have never seen America torn so apart than what it is right now on a political level, that if we don't watch, eventually will lead down or bleed down to the same type of resistance movement that basically formigated a civil war whenever people at that time was at their wits' end and realized that they was being done wrong. For whatever reason, regardless whether it was the North fighting the South or the South fighting the North, they both basically had the same concept. And if we don't watch, we're going to fall back into that same entrapment. Repeating history once more again. Thank you for listening. Good luck to each and every one of us as we end our program by saying God bless America, God bless our troops. Good luck to each and every one of us. And shalom. And I'm sorry that I've had to take the initiative of voicing my opinion so much about various political affairs here in America. But I feel like that if I just sat back and didn't use my voice for something, that it would only continue to get more stagnant and begin even more poisonous. And we're trying to head off that moment of despair in regards towards bloodshed, if we can do so in a reasonable way. That's the whole primary purpose for me being boisterous the way that I am towards voicing my opinion about various subject matters that I've been talking about. God bless. Shalom.